The night I found out what my son and his wife had been planning, I was just trying to get a glass of water. That's all. A glass of water before bed. I'm 71 years old. I take a blood pressure pill every night at 10, and I need a full glass to wash it down. That's it. That's the whole reason I was standing in the hallway in my socks at 10:15 on a Tuesday in December, 3 days before Christmas. And that's the whole reason my life changed forever. I heard my daughter-in-law's voice first. She wasn't whispering. That's what still gets me, even now. She wasn't even trying to be quiet. She was speaking in that clipped, efficient tone she uses when she's organizing something, the same tone she used when she planned their kitchen renovation, when she scheduled my wife's funeral flowers, when she booked the family vacation to Myrtle Beach 2 summers ago. Businesslike. Decided. The appointment is the 27th, she said. That gives us 4 days after Christmas to get it done before the new year. I stopped walking. And he won't fight it? That was my son's voice. My son Daniel, 43 years old. The boy I coached in Little League. The boy I drove to the emergency room at 2 in the morning when he broke his collarbone falling off a trampoline. The boy I handed my entire retirement savings to without a second thought when he said he needed help with the down payment on this house. He won't even know what's happening until it's already done, my daughter-in-law said. I've already talked to the intake coordinator. Once we have the paperwork signed, it moves fast. I stood in that dark hallway for a long time. I did not get my glass of water that night. My name is Harold. I'm 71 years old, and until about 8 months ago, I lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. I'd lived there for 6 years, ever since my wife Patricia passed away from a stroke in the spring of the year I turned 65. We'd been married for 39 years. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, who kept a drawer full of cards bought in advance, who could make a pot of soup out of nearly nothing and have it taste like she'd been cooking all day. When she died, I didn't know how to do half the things she'd always done quietly, invisibly, without ever making a fuss about it. But I learned. That's what you do. You learn, or you fall apart, and I was not going to fall apart. I stayed in that apartment, paid my bills, kept my health, went to my doctor appointments. I walked 3 miles every morning through the park near my building. I volunteered at the public library on Thursday afternoons, helping adults with reading comprehension. I was not a man who needed to be managed. I want to be clear about that from the start, because the story I'm about to tell you could make it seem like I was some feeble, confused old man who didn't know what was going on around him. I was not. I am not. What I was trusting. And I was lonely. And those two things together made me blind to what was happening right in front of me for far too long. Daniel called me last March. He said he and his wife, Renee, had been talking, and they wanted me to move in with them. They had the space, a finished basement with its own bathroom and a separate entrance from the backyard. He said they didn't like the idea of me being alone. He said it would be good for their 2 kids, my grandchildren, to spend more time with me. He said Renee had suggested it herself. I was touched. I genuinely was. I didn't want to be a burden. That's always been my fear. From the moment Patricia died, that I would become a burden to the people I loved. So at first I said no. I said I was fine, that the apartment suited me, that they shouldn't rearrange their lives on my account. Daniel pushed back. He said it wasn't rearranging anything, it was an addition. He said the basement had been sitting unused for 2 years and it made more sense for family to be there than for them to rent it out to a stranger. He said Renee was excited about it. Renee got on the phone. She said, "Harold, we really want you here. The kids ask about you all the time. My granddaughter Sophie was 8. My grandson Marcus was 11. And they did ask about me. I knew that because Daniel told me. And because when I saw them at Thanksgiving and Easter, they would climb all over me and ask me to tell them stories about when their dad was little. Those kids were the best thing in my life after Patricia died. The absolute best thing. So I said yes. I gave up my apartment. I sold most of my furniture. I moved into the basement of my son's house in the suburb of Westerville with 2 suitcases, a box of books, Patricia's old armchair that I refused to part with, and enough goodwill to fill the whole house twice over. That was 8 months ago. The first few weeks were genuinely nice. Dinner together most nights. Sophie would come downstairs after school and sit in Patricia's armchair and tell me about her day. Marcus showed me how to play a video game I was absolutely terrible at, and he thought that was the funniest thing in the world. Daniel and I watched football on Sundays like we used to when he was a teenager. But Renee, I want to be fair to her, because I believe in being fair even to people who have wronged me. Renee is not a cruel person in the way that word usually means. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't make ugly scenes. What she does is quieter than that, and in some ways harder to defend against. She made me feel like a guest who had overstayed. It started small. Little comments about the noise from my television at night. I kept it low. I always kept it low. But apparently even low was too much. She rearranged the basement storage without asking me, and put 3 boxes of my things in the garage without telling me, things I'd been looking for weeks. When her friends came over for dinner parties, she would introduce me to them with this slightly pained smile and say, "Daniel's father lives with us," with just enough pause before Liv's to communicate that this was not entirely by choice. She started talking about my routine, as though my routine were a problem to be solved. Did I really need to walk in the mornings? The neighborhood wasn't that safe, she said. Had I thought about scaling back the library volunteering? It was a long drive and gas wasn't cheap. Had I talked to my doctor recently about, and here she would list symptoms I didn't have. I noticed all of this. I am not a fool, but I told myself it was adjustment, that living with another person's family is always an adjustment, that Renee had her way of doing things, and I needed to be respectful of that. Daniel seemed happy. The kids seemed happy. I focused on that. What I didn't focus on, because I never imagined I needed to, was the paperwork. About 2 months after I moved in, Daniel came to me and said he needed a favor. He and Renee were refinancing the house, and their financial advisor had suggested that as part of that process it might make sense to consolidate the accounts. Specifically, they wanted to be added to my bank account as co-signers, and they wanted to be listed as the primary contact on my pension and Social Security accounts. "Just in case," Daniel said. "In case something happened to me and they needed to access funds quickly, it made sense from a financial planning standpoint," he said. He seemed almost embarrassed to ask. I should have asked more questions, I know that now. But he's my son, he's Daniel. He broke his collarbone falling off a trampoline, and I carried him to the car at 2 in the morning. And in 39 years, I never once doubted whether he had my best interests at heart. I signed the paperwork he put in front of me. And then, 3 months later, I found a manila folder on the desk in the small office off the kitchen, the room Renee uses to manage their household accounts. I was not snooping. I want to be clear about that too. I was looking for a pen. The drawer I opened had a pen in it, and also this folder, and the folder had my name on the tab in Renee's handwriting. I took it downstairs. I sat in Patricia's armchair. I opened it. Inside was a brochure for a place called Meadow Creek Senior Living. There was a printout of their monthly rates, $6,200 per month for a standard room, more for enhanced care. There was a handwritten note in Renee's writing with a name, a phone number, and the words intake coordinator circled twice. There was a copy of a power of attorney document with my name on it and Daniel's name listed as the agent. And there was a printed email chain between Renee and someone whose email address included the words Meadow Creek Admissions. The most recent email in the chain was from 11 days before the night I found it. Renee had written, "We're looking at the week after Christmas. He doesn't have the physical mobility concerns that would require memory care, so a standard suite should be fine. We just need the transition to happen before the new year for the financial planning to work." I sat in Patricia's armchair for a very long time. I thought about calling Daniel downstairs right then. I thought about going upstairs and confronting Renee in the kitchen where she was making dinner. I could smell garlic and onions from where I sat. I thought about calling my brother in Cincinnati. I thought about what Patricia would have said. Patricia would have said, "Don't react. Think first. React later, when you're ready." So I thought. What I was dealing with was not a misunderstanding. The email was not ambiguous. He doesn't have the physical mobility concerns he, meaning me, discussed in clinical, impersonal terms like a piece of furniture being measured for a move. Before the new year for the financial planning to work, meaning once I was placed at Meadow Creek, they would have access to my pension and Social Security through the accounts they'd had me sign over, and those funds would flow into their household. $6,200 a month for my room, funded by my own retirement income, while they lived in the house I'd helped pay for. I was 71 years old, and my son and his wife were planning to warehouse me. I put the folder back exactly as I'd found it. I went for my walk the next morning as usual. I waved to my neighbor across the street, a retired postal worker named Gene who always had his paper on the porch by 6:30. I came back, I showered, I had breakfast. I was pleasant at dinner. I asked Marcus about his science project. I helped Sophie with 2 pages of long division homework. And then I called my brother. My brother's name is Roy. He's 67, still working part-time as an accountant, and he is the most practical person I have ever known in my life. When I told him what I'd found, there was a long silence on the phone. Then he said, "Harold, you need a lawyer." He recommended someone, a woman named Carol Simmons, who handled elder law in Columbus, whom Roy had used years ago for our mother's estate. I called her office the next morning from my cell phone, from the park, on my walk, away from the house. Carol was direct in a way I appreciated immediately. I described what I'd found. She told me that the power of attorney I'd signed was, depending on its specific language, potentially very broad, that Daniel could have the legal authority to make financial and even medical decisions on my behalf. She told me this was not uncommon and not automatically sinister, but given the context I was describing, she wanted to review the document. She also said something that I've thought about many times since. "Mr. Harold, the most important thing you can do right now is not let them know that you know." I asked her what I should do. She told me, "Over the next 3 weeks, I was the most pleasant houseguest in the history of Westerville, Ohio. I helped Daniel carry a new television up the stairs. I babysat Sophie and Marcus one Saturday so Daniel and Renee could go to a friend's birthday dinner. I complimented Renee's pot roast. I watched football. I was helpful and cheerful and present, and the entire time I was quietly, methodically, doing exactly what Carol had instructed me to do. First, I obtained copies of all the documents I had signed, the bank account cosigner forms, the pension contact updates, the power of attorney, and brought them to Carol's office. She reviewed them and told me that the power of attorney had not yet been formally activated. It would require a specific process to invoke, and as long as I was capable and willing to contest it, it could be challenged. The bank account changes, however, were already in effect. She helped me open a new account at a different bank entirely, in my name only, and we arranged for my pension and Social Security to be redirected there beginning January 1st. Second, I had a conversation with the Meadow Creek intake coordinator, not as myself, but through Carol's office to understand exactly what documentation would be required to place me there. We needed to know the timeline Renee had in mind and what steps were left. Third, and this was Carol's idea, I wrote everything down, every conversation I could remember, every detail from the folder, every small comment Renee had made over the months about my routine and my health and my needs. I wrote it all down in a notebook that I kept locked in the glove compartment of my car, which was the one place in that house that was entirely mine. And then I waited for Christmas. Christmas Eve was fine. Daniel's sister-in-law brought her family over, and there were 8 of us for dinner, and Sophie and Marcus tore through their presents with the kind of joy that makes you remember what the whole thing is supposed to be about. I sat next to Marcus and helped him set up a new remote control car, and he hugged me before bed and said, "This is the best Christmas ever, Grandpa." I hugged him back and I held on a little longer than usual. Christmas Day was fine too. We had a late breakfast. The kids played with their gifts. Daniel grilled steaks even though it was 32 degrees outside, which has been his tradition for reasons he's never fully explained and I've never questioned. Renee was cheerful, pleasant. She poured me a glass of wine and asked if I was comfortable and if I needed anything. I said I was fine. I said everything was perfect. I smiled at her, and she smiled back at me, and neither of us said what we were thinking. That night I called Roy and I told him tomorrow was the day. I could not sleep. I lay in Patricia's armchair instead of the bed, the way I sometimes did when sleep wouldn't come, with the lamp on low and one of her old books open on my lap, a paperback mystery. She'd been halfway through when she died, the bookmark still on her page, which I'd never moved. I looked at that bookmark and I thought about what she would think of all of this. I thought she would be heartbroken about Daniel. I think she would be less surprised about Renee. And I think she would tell me to handle it with dignity, to say what needed to be said without cruelty, to make sure the truth was known not for the sake of revenge, but for the sake of my own life. The morning of December 26th, I was up at 5:30. I drove to Carol's office. She'd agreed to be reachable, and I picked up the envelope she'd prepared for me. Then I drove to Roy's hotel. He'd come up from Cincinnati the night before. He looked me over when I opened the door, the way he always has since we were kids, assessing whether I was okay the way older siblings do, even when the other one is no longer a child. "You ready?" he said. "I've been ready for 3 weeks," I said. We drove back to the house together. Renee's car was in the driveway. Daniel's car was in the driveway. I unlocked the back door with my key to my son's house, to the house I'd helped finance, and Roy and I went inside and sat down at the kitchen table. We heard movement upstairs. A few minutes later, Daniel came down in his robe, stopped at the bottom of the stairs, and looked at me and then at Roy with an expression I can only describe as the face of a man trying to figure out how much time he has. "Roy," he said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I know you didn't," Roy said. Renee appeared behind Daniel on the stairs. She was already dressed. Of course she was. She had an appointment that morning at 10. She looked at us, and something shifted behind her eyes, the way it does when a person who has been moving confidently toward a plan suddenly senses the ground changing under them. "Harold," she said, "we were about to call you. We actually wanted to talk to you this morning." "I know," I said. "So let's talk." She and Daniel sat down across the table from me and Roy. I placed Carol's envelope on the table between us, and I watched both of them look at it. "I found the folder," I said. "The one with the Meadow Creek brochure, the emails, the power of attorney. I found it about 3 weeks ago." Daniel's face did something complicated. His mouth opened and then closed. Renee said nothing. She is too controlled for the kind of reaction that might have, in some other version of this moment, made me feel sorry for her. "I've been to see a lawyer," I said. "My pension and Social Security have already been redirected to a new account in my name. The power of attorney has been reviewed, and I've been advised on my options for contesting it. And Roy is here because I needed a witness, not because I need protection." I looked at my son, not at Renee, at Daniel. "I want you to explain it to me," I said. "I want you to sit across this table and explain to me why. That's all I want. I don't want to fight. I just want to know how we got here." The silence was the loudest thing I'd heard in a very long time. Daniel looked at his hands on the table. He said, "It wasn't supposed to be. It wasn't like it looks." "What was it like then?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Renee thought it would be better for everyone. You'd have care. You'd have people around you your own age. She said it was the practical—" "Daniel." Roy's voice was quiet but very firm. "Don't." Daniel stopped. Renee had still not said a word. She was looking at the envelope on the table. "I am 71 years old," I said. "I walk 3 miles every morning. I have no cognitive decline. My blood pressure is managed. I have mild arthritis in my left hand, and on my last physical, my doctor told me I was in excellent health for a man my age. I helped pay for this house. I have never been a burden. I have never asked for more than I was given. And I have never, not once in 43 years, given my son any reason to doubt that I loved him." My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "I'm moving out," I said. "Roy has a room for me in Cincinnati while I find my own place. I have enough in my accounts to be comfortable. I don't need anything from either of you except the truth. And since I can see I'm not going to get that this morning, I'll settle for my things." Renee spoke then. She said, in a voice that was almost too composed, "Harold, I think you're misunderstanding the intent. The email said, 'before the new year' for the financial planning to work." I said, "I read it several times. I didn't misunderstand anything." She stopped. I stood up. Roy stood up. I looked at my son one more time, and I waited, because I think somewhere in me I was still hoping that he would stand up too, that he would step away from her and come around the table and be the person I raised him to be, the person Patricia and I spent ourselves making sure he would be. He didn't stand up. I went downstairs and packed my bags. Roy carried the heavier one. I took Patricia's armchair to Roy's truck myself. It barely fit, but it fit. I got in the passenger seat, and I looked at the house while Roy started the engine. Sophie appeared in the upstairs window. She waved at me, confused. I waved back. I smiled so she wouldn't see anything she'd have to carry with her. Roy pulled out of the driveway, and I didn't look back again. That was 4 months ago. I want to tell you where I am now, because I think it matters. Roy found me an apartment in Cincinnati about a mile from his house. It's on the 3rd floor. which I climbed 3 times before deciding the elevator was not laziness but efficiency. It's smaller than my old Columbus apartment, but it has a big east-facing window in the living room that gets the morning light. And I've put Patricia's armchair in front of that window, and that is where I sit every morning with my coffee before my walk. The legal situation resolved in my favor. Carol ensured that the power of attorney was revoked. My accounts are entirely in my name, and there is nothing Daniel or Renee can access without my explicit consent. I have an updated will, a properly documented advance directive, and a medical power of attorney assigned to Roy. All of this is filed correctly and securely. I am not leaving anything open that can be used against me. I went to see my doctor for a full checkup in January. He told me what I already knew. I am in good shape for a 71-year-old man. My blood pressure is controlled. My joints are manageable. My mind is clear. He told me to keep walking, keep volunteering, keep eating the way I eat. I told him I'd recently gone through some significant stress, and he said it showed in my cortisol levels, but that those things recover. They recover. I like that. I've joined a library in Cincinnati that also does adult literacy work, and I volunteer there on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons now. There's a man in my group named Franklin who is 63 years old and is learning to read for the first time in his life, and when he reads a full paragraph out loud correctly, the expression on his face is the most uncomplicated joy I have seen in a very long time. That expression does something for me that I can't fully explain. It reminds me that it is never too late to start something. It reminds me that surviving something hard is not the same as being defeated by it. I have spoken to Daniel twice since I left. Both conversations were short. He has not apologized, not in any real way, not in the way that would require him to say clearly what he did and why it was wrong. He said things like, "I know it looked bad and I should have talked to you," which are the apologies of a man who is sorry he got caught rather than sorry he did it. I told him both times that I loved him and that my door was open. I meant it. I still mean it. He is my son, and there is no version of this where I stop loving him. But love doesn't mean I have to pretend something didn't happen. Love doesn't mean I hand back the keys. As for Renee, I hold no specific anger toward her. She is a person who looked at a 71-year-old man and saw a problem to be managed. That says something about her, not about me. I know who I am. I know what I have done in this life. I know the hours I put in, the sacrifices I made, the love I showed up to give again and again without keeping score. I know that I was a good husband, and I know that Patricia knew it too, and I know that I am a good father even if my son lost sight of that for a while. None of that changed in December. None of it went into a folder on Renee's desk. I turned 72 in February. Roy made me a German chocolate cake, which he's been making wrong since 1987. He always forgets the coconut in the frosting, and the kids from the library group gave me a card they'd all signed, and it took them a long time because several of them were still practicing their signatures. It was the best birthday I've had since Patricia was alive. The morning light comes through that east window in a way I'm still not used to. Every morning I sit down in that armchair, and it still surprises me a little. The light, the way it lands across the floor, and catches the cover of whatever book I have on the side table. Patricia would have loved this light. I think about her every day. I think about what she taught me without ever meaning to teach me anything. That you keep your integrity even when it costs you. That you do not ask for more than you need. That you love your children without condition and also without illusion. That you are allowed to protect yourself. That the end of something is not always the end of everything. I am 72 years old. I walk 3 miles every morning. I have a window full of light and a chair that still smells faintly of my wife's perfume, and a brother who makes cake wrong in a way I have come to count on completely. I am not someone to be managed. I am not done.